Welcome back. I'm sure you're eager to see exactly how we bring all of these little pieces together in this exercise. So let's start by looking at those instructions. We're going to start with item number 1. It tells us straight up we want to look at the print favorite books function, and specifically we want to zero in on whether there's an accidental type conversion that's happening. That's otherwise known as an implicit type conversion. And there's a little hint here that says if we've got something going from a number to a string, we can use the string function to modify that. So let's look at the print favorite books function, and you'll notice right off the bat that there is a value here that we know is a number because the length property of any array is a number. That number is being included inside of a string, which means that it's automatically or implicitly being converted from a number to a string. Now the truth is there's no big problem with converting numbers to strings. That's a pretty safe type conversion, and most developers probably wouldn't be that concerned about allowing that implicit coercion. But I do just want to point out, just for the sake of practice, that there's a way to be more explicit about it, and that is to wrap that call to favoriteBooks.length in a function call to the string function. So if I put string around the favoriteBooks.length, now we are explicitly saying make sure that it is a string value before it's concatenated or before it's dropped in to the larger string value. Won't change any of the output of your program, but it's just being a little bit more savvy, a little bit more aware about your types. And even if it wasn't a problem now, it is potentially some source of bug later, so anything you can do to make your code be a little bit more clear, a little bit more expressed and obvious, that will help you down the line. That's a really important practice to pick up as a developer. Okay, let's go back to the instructions. Let's look at number 2. We want to move the add favorite book and print favorite book functions into the bookshelf class. And now we're going to make them methods. And there's a really important hint here, which is that class methods, if you remember from the slides a little while ago, they don't have a function keyword in them. They're just the name there. So we've got to take the function keyword off. And also, don't miss this part, because they're going to be methods, we're going to need to update them to use the this keyword so that we are referencing our instance of our class. So I will do this one at a time. I'm going to take the add favorite book function, and we're going to move it inside of the class definition for bookshelf. I will indent it one. You'll notice even by my syntax highlighting, it can tell that the word function doesn't belong here. That's why it's white. So if we take that off, just like with our constructor, now we're defining a class method. A class method called add favorite book, which still takes in a book name. But what's important now is that favorite books is no longer a variable that we're going to access through lexical scope. We're going to access that through the this mechanism and the prototypes mechanism. So what we need to do is prefix that reference to favorite books with a this method, a this reference. Remember, whenever we call somewhere an instance of this bookshelf class, we're going to be saying something.addFavoriteBook, and that something.addFavoriteBook is going to tell addFavoriteBook to use a this that's pointing at that something instance. So that's why we want to make it a this aware method. We'll do the same thing with the print favorite books. We're going to move that inside of the bookshelf class definition. We're going to take off the function keyword so that it is a method now. And then we have 2 references to favorite books. We've got to make sure to put the this dot in front of both of them. If you don't end up putting it in front of both of them, you won't access the correct one. It'll be trying to find a global variable of that name. It won't find it. Things will break. You'll cry. So just make sure you make your functions, your methods rather, be this aware. Okay, we're making some good progress. Let's go back to our instructions. Number 3 in the instructions says for us to fill out the definition of the loadBooks function. Remember, that's outside of the class, so it's not a method, it's a function. It's outside of it, and we're going to fill it out, and it's going to receive as a parameter an instance of the bookshelf class. So we're going to have some kind of bookshelf that we're passing in, some sort of bookshelf instance. So we've already got the loadBooks function kind of sketched out here. We're going to need to name some kind of parameter, and I'll just say the bookshelf. For lack of a better name for it, we'll say the bookshelf, which is a specific instance of the general bookshelf class. Now, instruction number 4 says that loadbooks should call what we've already been provided as a fake AJAX function, and we're going to pass along a variable called book API, and we're going to write and pass along an inline function expression. That's a big old bunch of stuff. Let's break that down one at a time. First of all, we have a fake AJAX function that I've already provided. You're not supposed to change anything about it, but it's just here just to demonstrate the idea of making an AJAX call without all the complexity of needing a server to actually talk to. Okay, so fake AJAX, we can see, expects a URL and expects a CB, a callback, which is going to be a function that we invoke. And you'll notice that that function is going to get called with an array of book names. Okay, so what we need to do then is in load books, we need to actually call fake AJAX. And what we're going to pass to fake AJAX, first we're going to pass it a URL, and we have a variable called book API that we can pass in. So when we pass in book API, the way we're able to access that, by the way, that's lexical scope. This function doesn't have a book API variable, but it does have access to the outer scope, which has book API. Now we're going to need to pass in, the instruction said, an inline function expression. So we're going to write a function, and I want to give it a name. I don't want to use anonymous functions here. I want to give it a name, and I'm going to call this onBooks because I know that this is loading my books, and so onBooks is indicating that I have received them back. And so the parameter name that I'm going to get, remember it's an array of book names, so I'm just going to call it book names, plural. I'll put those curly braces there, and now this is an inline function expression. It's a name function expression that's going to get invoked whenever CB is called. That's going to be calling our onBooks function and passing an array of book names. Now let's go back to the README and check what item 5 says. It says the callback's going to be passed an array of book names. We should loop through this array and pass each book name to add favorite book method on whatever instance we passed in to load books. So we passed in this the bookshelf instance, and it's the thing that has an add favorite book method on it. So we're going to actually call, we want to loop through the book names. Remember loops. We're going to do another for of loop. We'll say let book name of book names. And for each of these book names, we want to say the bookshelf dot, and the method we're going to call is add favorite book. Remember what I was saying just a little while ago? Here is our function call site. Using the implicit binding, it's going to invoke this method, the one from line 6, but it's going to invoke it in this context of our instance, which is this book, the bookshelf. And that's the thing that's holding this copy of the favorite books array. So we want to pass in book name to the bookshelf.addFavoriteBook method. Now after that for loop finishes, all of our book names should have been added in to our instance of the bookshelf. And lastly, the instructions tell us that we should call the print favorite books method on that same instance. So we're going to say the bookshelf dot print favorite books. And again, here's our implicit binding. The print favorite books function knows that it should be invoked with this keyword that is pointing at the bookshelf. Last step then, it says in item 6 that we need to create an instance of bookshelf class and pass it in as an argument to load books. So let's try that. Let's say, look, we're going to make an instance, so I'll call this my books equals new bookshelf. That's for instantiating an instance of a class. And then we're going to call load books, and we're going to pass in my books, and that should invoke our function. There will be a delay. Remember the set timeout, it's going to delay, but because of closure, it still knows about the bookshelf. That's our closure being used across that function boundary. Still knows about the bookshelf, and it's able to invoke methods on it, and then those are able to get this context for our instance. So With all those pieces in place, let's cross our fingers and let's go over to a runtime environment like run.js and let's test it and see how it works. And there we go. If I scoot this over, we can see it did in fact print out our favorite books 3 and our list of our 3 favorite books, and it did that by pulling those from the favorite books array that is on our instance of the bookshelf class. So, we wove all 3 of the major pillars of JavaScript into this one code base. We took care of our types and our conversion. We made them more explicit in places just so things were clearer. We used some closure to remember things even over time, even when a function's executed at a later time. And we used a class instance to collect some data and some methods behavior, some method behavior together into one instance. And that is a good illustration of the breadth of things that you want to make sure you practice and try to get to some more level of expertise on as you go throughout your JavaScript career. That won't be tomorrow or the next day or even the next week, but those are the 3 things. That's your roadmap that you want to focus on as you work towards learning and digging further into the JavaScript language. Make sure you try this exercise at least a couple more times. Start from the blank empty file or from the original file, try it from scratch, and make sure to practice each of those things. And maybe even try changing a few things. Maybe make a few instances of Bookshelf and try to make a few different calls and pass in different results. And check to see that you understand how each of these 3 pieces is moving with respect to all the others. There is no substitute in learning JavaScript other than just writing the JavaScript. I hope you've had fun with this exercise. I hope it's been enlightening. I hope it's sparked some curiosity for you. And I look forward to seeing the kind of JavaScript that you'll be writing very, very soon.